I'm back. Critical thinking terminology, okay, with yours truly. This video, okay, this is going to be the video you can use not only in your academic life, but also in your contentious, argumentative personal life. Because we unfortunately live in an age of debate purgatory, where it doesn't matter what the argument is or who's right or wrong. It's like, who wins? So debates have become blood sports now, where the goal is to do gotchas. Oh look, he made a fool of him, I win. Or I win because I'm a giant arsehole and I basically push you to capitulation. Critical thinking, let me get the old laser pointer here to really emphasize my point. Critical thinking, okay? Critical thinking is something you see in your thesis or your essays or academic life, okay? But it has bled into the normie world, the non-academic world, where they're using our bloody terms now to further their own agendas, okay? So I'm here now to take back the terms, to put the toys back in the box, as it were, and to leave the outside academic world to their own devices, okay? So let's get cracking on this, okay? Let me put myself in my little circle. Actually, first of all, I should get sponsored by Country Spring or whatever, whoever does the water. Ballygan, if you're watching, I'm only a poor academic. I need the money. Now look, the world of the internet and critical thinking terms, okay? The blurring of the lines between online research and academic research, okay? We've all encountered these people who have done their own research, okay? Who have somehow found what us academics have not seen. We're just sheep, We're blindly following the data into the wrong holes. And yeah, it's just, I don't know how to solve it, Not going to do it in this video. How can we break down critical thinking, okay? So look, the what, who, where, when, how, and why, okay? That's going to help you get started, okay? What if, what next, so what? So attempting to answer these questions systematically helps to fill 3 vital functions for any serious study: description, analysis, and evaluation, okay? Mind your mouth. So here's the real meat of it, okay? This video is going to be me going through the terms, breaking them down. So when someone says, well, that's a logical fallacy, where what you're doing there is cognitive dissonance, or you're strawmanning me, or you're steelmanning me, I'm going to break down those terms for you, okay? Here's the basic ones, okay? We all know these ones here. Analysis, breaking down information into its components to understand the structure and relationships. Definition of evaluation, assessing the strengths and weaknesses of information, arguments, or solutions. And then inference is drawing logical conclusions based on available evidence and reason. Now that is very important. Give me my highlighter till I really emphasize that. When someone says, you're only inferring, well, it's like, yeah, I'm drawing logical conclusions based on available evidence and reason. Unfortunately, this word has drifted into the the maelstrom of the online research fantasy world. And now it's sort of a dirty word, but I'm here to claim it back, okay? Drawing logical is the key term. Conclusions based on evidence and reasoning is the other important term, okay? Now look, we have deductive reasoning here, okay? So this is drawing specific conclusions from general principles or premises. Okay, so let's have a look at the premise here. If it rains, the ground will be wet. Here's premise 2, it is raining. Here's conclusion, therefore the ground is wet. Okay, that's okay. So in this example, the first premise establishes a conditional statement indicating that if it rains, the ground will be wet. The second premise provides the information that it is indeed raining. Applying deductive reasoning, the conclusion logically follows that the ground must be wet because it is currently raining. And the first premises establish the relationship between rain and a wet ground, okay? All very simple, all very good, okay? So look, whenever someone says you need to use a bit more deductive reasoning there, that's basically what it is, okay? And we have a few more examples here. So let's look at an example from law and an example from the economic world. All citizens have the right to free speech. John is a citizen, okay? You get the message now? Look, therefore John has the right to free speech. If demand increases and the supply remains constant, prices will rise. Demand has increased, therefore prices will rise. Okay. Now, here's my other favorite one, inductive reasoning. Okay. A little bit more trickier. Okay. You can get a few weasels in here now trying to induct their own reasoning into it. Forming general conclusions from specific observations or evidence. The first 5 days of the week, Monday to Friday, were sunny. The 6th day, Saturday, was sunny. The 7th day, Sunday, was sunny. Inductive generalization, all days of the week are sunny. So it's a false assumption there, okay? So you're basically saying that, well, look, I mean, it's been sunny for this week, so it must be sunny every week. In this example, the observations are specific instances of each day's weather. Inductive reason is used to make a generalization, now that's the important term, based on these observations, suggesting that all days of the week are sunny. It's important to note that while inductive reasoning can provide strong evidence, it doesn't guarantee absolute certainty, as future observations could potentially contradict the generalization. Next week could be raining. If you live in Ireland like I do, we don't talk about the weather. More examples. Psychology. Conducting surveys and interviews with a diverse group of individuals and finding that a majority exhibit certain behavior can lead to inductively reasoning that the behavior is common in the entire population. In sociology, you might have a look at a series of case studies on various communities, and you might see a pattern of increased social cohesion leading to higher levels of individual well-being. And this could result in an inductive conclusion that social cohesion positively impacts well-being. And in the literary world, reading several works by a particular author and observing a consistent theme or writing style, one might inductively reason that the author has a distinctive literary voice. Now that can be true. But you cannot, it could change also, so you can't just say, because we are, like as human beings, we are flexible. Well, you could see the merit of saying, well, this is perfectly okay. You have to, in the academic world where these terms were sort of, found their footing, this is what it means, okay? So you have to be careful when you're doing your literature review not to make broad assumptions, say, this author would agree with me because the last 30 years he has been agreeing with me. But then neglecting the study he brought out where he says, actually I was wrong. I'm going to change my outlook on stuff, okay? So just be conscious of that. Here's my favorite one, okay? Logical fallacies, flawed patterns of reasoning that can lead to incorrect conclusions. So here's examples of some of them under that category. An ad hominem. You can't trust Professor Smith's research on climate change because he drives a gas-guzzling SUV. Attacking the person making the argument rather than addressing the argument. Play the ball, not the man. That's basically whenever it says someone, just play the ball, not the man. Let's discuss the argument, right? Not the actual person. Now, this is a huge thing in the online research sphere, the marketplace of ideas, the lovely world that the internet has fostered, basically, where you just see these all over the place. It sort of sometimes form a comfortable relationship with the whatabouteries. Well, what about this? Well, just stay on the topic, and people who are a bit whataboutery or who do engage in this ad hominem shite, their literature reviews when they go to do a thesis suffers because they bring that into the academic world where it doesn't really belong because, and you may not do it explicitly by saying, well, the next thing I'm going to discuss, we can discount it because he's a liberal, or let's discount it because he's conservative. Or he had a particularly bad take on the Israel-Palestine situation, or he supported the war on terror, back in the early 2000s. So therefore, what he's saying is irrelevant. So just be careful with that sort of stuff. Always be a little bit detached from everything, okay? Straw man. So we should invest more in improving our schools. And then, the typical response to that is, so you're saying we should just throw unlimited amounts of money at education without any accountability. No, that's not what I said. Listen to what I'm saying. We should invest more in improving our schools. If you hear this and you think, well, I'll just go hungry then, so you're just saying that I should pay for it. We also have steel manning, and there's other terms like Aunt Sally. There's a whole heap of terms that can be put in. Like steel manning is sort of the opposite, where you take the strongest form of their argument and you hyper focus on that. and sort of get away from the actual issue. So there's a whole heap of these ones, but for this one, you know, the straw man, the interlocutor, you know, the sort of the voice no one asked for that somehow appeared in the debate slash argument slash analysis. But yeah, whenever someone says straw man, that's essentially what they're talking about. It's someone addressing your point but doing it in the most childish, uncharitable way possible. So here's a few more examples now, okay? False cause, post hoc ergo propter hoc, okay? So I wore my lucky shoes and aced the test, so the socks, I wore my lucky socks and aced the test, so the socks the reason I did well. Issue, assuming that because one event follows another, the first issue caused the second, okay? An appeal to ignorance. No one has proven that aliens don't exist, so they must be out there. So using the lack of evidence as evidence, okay? Now, a lot of these you won't see in academia overtly or explicitly, but they do appear subtly if you just keep an eye out for them. But a lot of these, when they reach the online world, sort of the non-academic world, the so-called marketplace of ideas, they're a bit more in your face, you know, and they will involve aliens to some extent. Circular reasoning. The Bible is true because it says so, and we know it's the word of God because it's in the Bible, using the conclusion as one of the premises, okay? Now, hasty generalization. I met two people from New York and they were both rude. All New Yorkers must be rude then. So drawing a general conclusion from insufficient or biased evidence. Now, you know, you could go on and on about this one being used to justify genocide, justify racial discrimination, gender discrimination. It's been used throughout history terribly, like especially in terms of slavery or in justifying war. You know, look at the war of terror, you know, drawing a general conclusion from insufficient or biased evidence. Okay, so here's some more, okay? Appeal to authority. The famous actor endorsed his product, so it must be the best one on the market, okay? So relying on the endorsement of a famous person rather than on the merits of the product itself. And a red herring. We need to address climate change, but first let's talk about the unemployment rate. So you're introducing irrelevant information to divert attention from the main issue. Quite common whenever you're losing an argument, you're basically saying, well, what about this? Well, what about that? And you're sort of appealing to your strengths. You're appealing to what you know. A lot of people who are deficient in information and facts, when you hit them with something that makes a little bit of sense or an issue that's important, they'll just say, well, what about? Well, what about this and what about that? You can do two things at the same time. You can do multiple things at the same time. Just because someone is focusing on one thing doesn't mean that something else gets neglected. No matter how much you want to say that is the case, we have one mouth and we usually have one speed, and we can't talk about multiple things at the same time. In your literature review, this sometimes in your discussion chapter, this manifests as back and forth. So let's talk about this, but let's talk about this other thing first. And then, okay, we're going to come back to this now. And you're like, just make the argument. If you're making the argument, make the argument. Don't just start dancing around it or going back and forth. So here's a few more things, okay? False dichotomy. Either you support every aspect of the government's policy or you're against your country. Presenting only two options when more exist. Okay, so it's a very popular one these days. Begging the question. Circular reason. So I'd return to that one. The death penalty is wrong because it is a form of cruel and unusual punishment. The premise assumes the conclusion. And the most famous for all you debate perverts out there, okay, is a form of argument and an informal fallacy where an arguer conflates two positions that share similarities. One modest and easy to defend, the mot, and one much more controversial and harder to defend, the bailey, okay? So here's an example of this. So the mot, we should implement stricter regulations to protect endangered species and preserve biodiversity. It's crucial for maintaining the balance of ecosystems. But implementing such regulations would harm business and the economy. We need to prioritize job and growth, or growth and job creation. So in this example, the speaker starts with the defensible position, the mot, of protecting endangered species for ecological balance. But when faced with criticism about the potential economic impact, they retreat to the less defensible position, the bailey, of prioritizing economic growth. Once the criticism diminishes, they can return to advocating for environmental protection. Okay. This tactic allows the speaker to shift their argument strategically, making it difficult for opponents to pin them down on a specific position and effectively challenge their reason. Okay, so that's very popular, especially in the online world. So critical reading, now I brought up this in a few of my videos. Actively and analytically engaging with written material to understand, evaluate and question its content. Critical reading in academia involves carefully analysing and evaluating texts, considering the author's arguments, evidence and the overall context. Let's have a look at some examples here, okay? Analysing a novel's characters, plots and themes and critically assessing the author's use of literary devices to convey a specific message or perspective. In science, reading a scientific research paper and evaluating the methodology, data presentation and conclusions, ensuring that the research design is sound and the results are valid. And then history, critically examine a historical document or account considering the author's biases, the historical context and alternative perspectives on events. And then here's examples for philosophy, political science and economics. So you can have a look at them there. Now, here's something that's very important when you're doing your systematic reviews or even your primary research. Bias recognition is very important. Identifying and understanding personal and cultural biases that may influence thinking and decision making. Confirmation bias, very important one. So the tendency of individuals to seek, interpret and remember information in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. So this is very, very relevant in today's online world. It involves giving preferences to information that aligns with one's existing views and avoiding or downplaying information that contradicts them. Okay, so confirmation bias can hinder critical thinking by leading individuals to selectively consider evidence that supports their existing beliefs while dismissing or ignoring evidence that challenges those beliefs. So this basically leads to people having a lack of objectivity and an incomplete analysis of information. Probably as a starting off researcher / academic, not something you have to worry too much about unless you're really into bringing your own biases into it. People usually do it at the outset by accident. They might quote from people who have confirmation bias and not realize it. But it's rare to see a student, engage in this sort of stuff themselves, at least on a mass scale anyway. So critical thinking is crucial in overcoming confirmation bias by encouraging individuals to actively seek out and consider information that challenges their existing beliefs. Evaluate the credibility and reliability of sources, regardless of whether the information aligns with preconceived notions. Recognize and mitigate the influence of personal biases on their thinking, and engage in logical and objective analysis rather than relying solely on emotional or preconceived reactions. Now, critical thinking, okay? Confirmation bias in academia occurs when individuals seek, interpret, or remember information in a way that confirms their pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. A lot of people do it by accident. So look, here's a research bias example. A psychologist studying the effects of violent video games on aggression might design experiments and interpret results in a way that confirms their belief in the harmful effect of such games, while downplaying or disregarding evidence suggesting otherwise. And then here's some other examples in different ways. So a climate scientist conducting literature review on the causes of global warming might selectively include studies supporting the anthropogenic human-caused climate change theory, while omitting or minimize research suggesting natural climate variability as a significant factor. This also happens in the reverse. Just be careful of people's agendas whenever you're looking at these type of examples. Citation bias example. A sociologist studying income inequality may primarily cite research that supports the notion of structural factors contributing to inequality, while neglecting studies emphasizing individual agency or cultural factors, thus reinforcing confirmation bias in the field. So look, let's have a look at some other important terms. So metacognition and contextual understanding. So metacognition, thinking about one's own thinking process, reflecting on and evaluating the effectiveness of one's thought process, considering the context in which information is presented, and understanding how it may impact interpretation. These are very, very important. Always be thinking about why you're thinking. So if something is basically on your mind as a definite, say, well, why is that a definite? Or why has this author come to this conclusion in the literature review? So always be thinking about thinking. And here's the one we finally come to: cognitive dissonance. So it refers to the discomfort or psychological tension that arises when an individual holds conflicting beliefs, attitudes, or values. And it may lead to a reluctance to critically evaluate new information or a tendency to reject it outright. And this is where critical thinking comes in. Now, a lot of people say they have critical thinking. Ironically, the people who hold these sort of conflicting viewpoints or skewed viewpoints will often say, well, I use critical thinking, or I'm a big advocate for critical thinking, even though they don't use it, or they don't use it correctly. Critical thinking allows you to assess the validity and credibility of the new information. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people basically say, well, I'm only going to look at videos that, basically feed into what I believe. And what I believe is not my own belief. Someone told me to believe it, basically. And I've clinged on to it, and I've made my whole identity around this belief. So if I want to get an alternative viewpoint, and I will tell people, well, look, I always see what the other side are doing. You don't. More often than not, you see what the other side are doing through the lens of someone in your own group. So what you're doing is you're indulging in a little bit of gossip there, or the gossip model, essentially, which is you get all your information about a person from a person that isn't the person. If someone's attacking someone you're kind of like, well, I'll go and see what the original person makes of it. But you don't do that. You basically say, I'm going to base my opinion off that person based on someone else's opinion, okay? So you lack the ability then to assess the validity and credibility of any information you receive. Or you also lack the ability to reflect on the possibility of modifying or adjusting your beliefs in light of new evidence. So here's some examples. A biologist who is personally religious might experience cognitive dissonance when studying evolution. To reconcile this, they may compartmentalize their religious beliefs and scientific understanding, leading to discomfort. A climate scientist advocating for sustainable practices might experience cognitive dissonance if they find themselves invested in environmentally harmful activities such as excessive travel or resource consumption. Educational psychology, very important example here. A professor who believes in the importance of student-centered learning may experience cognitive dissonance if they find themselves relying on traditional lecture-based teaching methods due to time constraints or institutional expectations. Now, this is a huge one in this day and age, where lecturers are often at odds with their institution and their learning styles, because they might kind of say to themselves, you know what, I think students learn better this way. But they can't implement that because they might be time poor, and they might be time poor because the institution has decided, you know what, you need to do 20 hours of paperwork and fill out these forms. Where they're just thinking, you know what, I really have all these great slides, I have all this great information I want to give to students. The college is not letting me, so yeah, whatever, I don't care. But then they have to go and teach about student-centered learning, while consciously aware that this isn't student-centered learning that I'm engaging in here. Okay, look, be wary of how you argue. So argue like academics, not YouTube essayists, okay? Academics will draw from, as I said, intertextuality, critical engagement, critical analysis. You'll use all those terms, all the terms I have here, you will be aware of them, but you'll be aware of them in the context of academia, okay? When in doubt, look at books prescribed to you on your reading list. Now, the frequent thing, and I've heard it myself to people over the years, especially when I encounter the YouTube essayists in the wild who decided to go to college, or someone who has been used to learning all their information online, they just suddenly decide, well, I'm going to go to college. And they almost go to college as sort of like a challenge to themselves. Not in terms of learning, but it's almost like, well, I'm going to walk into the belly of the beast. I'm going to go to woke communist university, which many people believe, or many people on one particular, let's call them aspect of the political spectrum, believe that universities are basically just factory floors for woke communists to fly out of, like myself, So when someone goes, you only read the books on this list, someone from that mindset will go, oh, look at this. This is just, I'm not allowed to read outside of it, because they're trying to keep the true information from us. There's plenty of arguments you could make without having to descend into, whatever fantasy novel you want to impose on it this week. The reading list is just like, these are the books that we think would help you answer your question. You're only a novice researcher, you're starting out, have a look at these. When you have enough of a critical thinking mindset, or when you kind of say to yourself, you know what, I think I have enough information in me now to avoid falling down any more rabbit holes, then by all means go out and look for other stuff. It's not about keeping you locked into a pen that you can't read anything outside of it. Prescribed reading list is basically like, just start off here. Start off with these books and see what's happening in them. So college is not about like switching your brain off. It's about sort of like challenging you to use your brain. Read reviews on books from journals. YouTube reviews do not count. It's very important, okay? If you read reviews of the book from academics, they'll approach it from an academic point of view. If you just go, well, this book is really popular, and I've seen people put like YouTube essays in their bibliography, and I'm always like, do you know this and this about this person, or like, you know, they haven't actually published stuff on it. I mean, anyone could set up a YouTube channel and start talking about stuff, but that doesn't mean that what they're saying is correct, you know. So it's like, if you're going to argue from an academic point of view, stay within the academic lane. Just to jump off that point, the marketplace of ideas, call it marketplace for a reason, for there's always some monetary incentive to carry ideas back and forth. So we've come now to the end of the video. Hopefully from looking at those terms you get an idea that some of them are not as clear cut as they would be presented online. A lot of people use them in the online space for different reasons, often, as I mentioned there, in the marketplace of ideas, the battleground of all internet intellectuals. There's usually a grift or some sort of, you know, and I say that from both the left and the right, you know. I'm not both sides in it. I'm more left leaning myself, but I will acknowledge that some people do jump on the bandwagon, okay? But from an academic point of view, it's important to recognize that there's that world and then there's the academic world, and you're in the academic world if you're watching these videos. And just be careful with blurring the lines between the two, because lecturers, supervisors, examiners, they're used to seeing that all the time and they hate it. We all hate it because they should be kept separate. You know, academia should be a sort of a hollowed place where learning is cultivated, and even though it falls short of that sometimes, okay, that's what it should be. Okay, it should be a place where you're detached and you look at different ideas. As much as people, your favorite YouTube essayist claims that, that's not always the case from what I can see, because they don't, and it's not about platforming. It's not about saying, well, we should talk to everyone, okay? That shouldn't happen, okay? Some people should not be platformed because their agenda is purely just to propagate whatever nonsense they're talking about. As I said, play the ball, not the man, okay? If there's no ball and you're just playing the man, well then that's all there is the man. And I mean man in general terms to include women as well. If there's no ball on the field, then stop playing, because you're just literally just running around and you're following arguments around the pitch and it literally goes nowhere. No one wins because there's no ball on the field. In academic terms, you end up with nothing in your thesis other than just like, well, they said this and they said that. And it's like, okay, well, can you just critically analyze a bit more? Why are you using this study? Why are you not using the other study? What are the main arguments in the field? All the stuff on the prescribed reading list will help you with that. And whenever your supervisor mentions critical thinking, this looks like a logical fallacy, cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, this video will help you see what those are and will help you avoid them. The main thing to take away from this video is just to recognize that there is an academic world and there's an online, that's inverted commas, academic world, okay? The academic world versus the online academic world, there is a line that has to be drawn there. You can't merge the two and you have to be very careful. You'll see the terms here. Once you recognize them, apply those terms to the people you watch and see if their argument still holds water, you know? Because I know a lot of people claim to have a well-rounded view of and everything is political. Everything is political now, and everything always was political. Everything was always political. When colleges started talking about socioeconomic conditions in the 80s and 90s, it was political, because politics is what runs everything. We live in a democratic society. So any research or any talks about critical race theory, you know, or socioeconomic conditions or migration, these have been going on for decades. So like, it's silly to say, well, it's only been introduced in the last few years. It's like, well, just because you didn't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And again, it comes back to only seeing with your eyes. If all you're seeing is what's in front of you, then you're not seeing anything, because you have to use the rest of you. Use your brain and see that before you were born, or before you became involved in online politics or online academic discourse, there was a world that existed before you. And it was an academic world. And academia will be there when you're gone. And these arguments will still be going back and forth. Be conscious of who you're drawn from. Be conscious of the world that's around you. And be conscious of the terms that are used out there, okay? So at the very least, if this video has not been relevant to you academically, by all means use the power slide to hammer your favorite or nemesis into the ground with, okay?